now. And Dr. McIntyre, turning it over to you.
Great. Does everyone have the right screen with the PowerPoint now? Hopefully.
Yes.
Great. So thank you all for joining me this afternoon or evening. I'm really excited to be here with you, and I'm pleased to see it's actually kind of a smaller group, so I hope that we can have some really meaningful discussion. So I will invite you to participate as much as possible. I think that always makes these sorts of topics a lot more meaningful when we can all share from our own experiences, whatever we're comfortable sharing. So please do join in terms of audio in the chat, wherever you're comfortable sharing in throughout the presentation today. So I'm going to start us off by doing a little check-in, and then after we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about why the way we think about things matters, and then move into exploring how persistence and resilience can help us to thrive in challenging times. And then at the very end, we'll talk about some more tangible strategies that we can all think about for either building or sustaining our resilience. So the topic of positive thinking and persistence and resilience, these things may be very familiar to you, they may be newer to you. For those of you who are familiar with these ideas, I just invite you to revisit them. I think for me personally, it's always been helpful to check back in and touch base with how helpful some of these strategies can be. So I hope that this will give you some takeaways that will help support your own well-being, especially during this pandemic and also during these more recent anti-racist efforts and movements in our country. I'm sure we're all experiencing a lot of different challenges, and so hopefully something will speak to you individually throughout the rest of the hour. So I wanted to start by asking you to participate, if you will, in a brief poll, and it'll generate us a word cloud to just touch base about what words come to mind for you when you think about the COVID-19 pandemic and what your experience has been. So I'm going to exit this for a minute and I'll put our poll everywhere up. But if you just make sure that you jot down the 2 ways to enter the poll first before I change screens. So either through accessing the website or through texting. And let me know if you need another minute. Hopefully you have that. But go ahead and enter the word or words. You can enter more than one words. And then I will share my screen and we can see what everyone has been thinking. Hopefully my screen is on the right way now. Thanks for bearing with me. All right, so I will switch over in just a second to show you the responses. All right, we're getting a few words in. I'll give everyone another minute. Okay. So here we go, full screen. We've got a lot of good words coming in. Let me switch this. Okay, hopefully you can see the words that are coming in now. Do let me know if you're not. So we can see, gosh, lots of good ones. Social isolation, distancing, anxiety seem to be pretty common. Challenging, community, lonely, togetherness, so some positive things, community, safety, or maybe safety is not a positive thing, maybe we're feeling unsafe. Newness, empowerment, vulnerability, relationships, worried, graduation, that's a big one, parents, lots of great words. Thank you for participating in that. And I think what really stands out to me here, which is exactly what I was anticipating we might see, is that there are so many good and challenging things about the time that we're experiencing right now. So let me go back to our presentation. Okay. Oh, we still have some new words coming in. All right, so we're going to move on now to talk a little bit about, I keep getting the display wrong. There we go. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about how important it is to reframe the way that we think about things and how much of an impact that can have on our health and well-being. So as we kind of move into the next stage of this presentation, we're going to start to examine what the research tells us about positive thinking and what kind of an impact it can have on our health and well-being. So there's a lot of research about positive psychology, positive thinking, optimism. I'm sure some of us are really familiar with it, have read books about it, have watched different TED Talks or videos about it. But I think the thing that really is important, okay. Just hold on for 1 second. Okay, 1 second. Let me stop my share and do this again because I guess we're having some difficulties with my view. Here we go. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Are we in the right place now? All right, I'm going to stay here. Thank you. All right, so anyways, the thing that's most exciting to me about positive thinking as we kind of think about the research is this is something that we can all learn to do and be better at. And there really is a significant impact on our overall well-being. So positive thinking in general has been associated with an overall increase in well-being and quality of life. So again, there's so much research and so many studies that support this idea. So there have been studies that show that positive thinking results in success across many, many different life domains. So this might relate to us in our role as students, as faculty, in our social relationships, in our physical well-being, which is such an interesting part of positive thinking, and our ability to be creative, to cope well, and to overall thrive. And again, this is something that we can learn. So we can get better at shifting our thinking to better regulate our emotions. And this has been shown to have lasting effects when we can learn this trait. In some research at Columbia, Kevin Ostner shows that teaching people to think about stimuli in different ways can actually help them reframe the initial emotional response that they have to a more positive one. So we know that neurologically and physically, these impacts are really real and embodied. So what are some other aspects of our particular roles, of those of you who are here tonight in this presentation? There's a lot of research that talks about students in particular. So positive psychology principles can show an increase in student engagement, in enjoyment of the learning process, and in our social abilities in our role as a learner. As we would all imagine, mental health is significantly affected by optimism and positive thinking. And positive thinking can really increase our self-perceived vitality. It can also help us reduce the incidence of depression, which again is really important during these times of so much challenge in our world. And lastly, the other really interesting thing, which we're going to look into a little bit more deeply, is how our physical health is affected by our mindset. So these are a couple of studies that I think are just so interesting that really highlight how powerful our mind is. So one is a study of male war veterans, and in that study it showed that people who were thinking more optimistically were less likely to suffer from cardiac dysfunction, so less heart attacks, less angina, and also had higher levels of pulmonary function. And in a study about HIV positive men, positive thinking or positive affect or mindset had predicted lower risk of AIDS-related mortality. So these are significant life-preserving effects that our mind can have on our overall sense of well-being. So I debated about how much of this video to show you. It is such an amazing TED Talk by Dr. Kelly McGonigal, and it's titled How to Make Stress Your Friend. It's about 14 minutes. I've tried to narrow it down to about 6 minutes because she just discusses these topics so perfectly. And some of you may have seen this. If you have, I just invite you to kind of reconnect with her message again. So we'll spend the next 6 minutes watching a clip of her talk, and then talk a little bit about what our response is to that. So her message is really about these ideas that both the way we think about stress and adverse experiences matters, and the importance of the social connections that come out of stressful experiences that help us to build our resilience. So hopefully the video goes smoothly. Here we go.
In a study conducted at Harvard University. Before they went through the social stress test, they were taught to rethink their stress response as helpful. That pounding heart is preparing you for action. If you're breathing faster, it's no problem. It's getting more oxygen to your brain. And participants who learned to view the stress response as helpful for their performance, well, they were less stressed out, less anxious, more confident. But the most fascinating finding to me was how their physical stress response changed. Now, in a typical stress response, your heart rate goes up and your blood vessels constrict like this. And this is one of the reasons that chronic stress is sometimes associated with cardiovascular disease. It's not really healthy to be in this state all the time. But in the study, when participants viewed their stress response as helpful, their blood vessels stayed relaxed like this. Their heart was still pounding, but this is a much healthier cardiovascular profile. It actually looks a lot like what happens in moments of joy and courage. Over a lifetime of stressful experiences, this one biological change could be the difference between a stress-induced heart attack at age 50 and living well into your 90s. And this is really what the new science of stress reveals, that how you think about stress matters. So my goal as a health psychologist has changed. I no longer want to get rid of your stress. I want to make you better at stress. And we just did a little intervention. If you raised your hand and said you'd had a lot of stress in the last year, we could have saved your life. Because hopefully the next time your heart is pounding from stress, you're going to remember this talk, and you're going to think to yourself, this is my body helping me rise to this challenge. And when you view stress in that way, your body believes you, and your stress response becomes healthier. Now, I said I have over a decade of demonizing stress to redeem myself from. So we are going to do one more intervention. I want to tell you about one of the most underappreciated aspects of the stress response. And the idea is this: stress makes you social. To understand this side of stress, we need to talk about a hormone, oxytocin. And I know oxytocin has already gotten as much hype as a hormone can get. It even has its own cute nickname, the cuddle hormone, because it's released when you hug someone. But this is a very small part of what oxytocin is involved in. Oxytocin is a neurohormone. It fine-tunes your brain's social instincts. It primes you to do things that strengthen close relationships. Oxytocin makes you crave physical contact with your friends and family. It enhances your empathy. It even makes you more willing to help and support the people you care about. Some people have even suggested we should snort oxytocin to become more compassionate and caring. But here's what most people don't understand about oxytocin. It's a stress hormone. Your pituitary gland pumps this stuff out as part of the stress response. It's as much a part of your stress response as the adrenaline that makes your heart pound. And when oxytocin is released in the stress response, it is motivating you to seek support. Your biological stress response is nudging you to tell someone how you feel instead of bottling it up. Your stress response wants to make sure you notice when someone else in your life is struggling so that you can support each other. When life is difficult, your stress response wants you to be surrounded by people who care about you. Okay, so how is knowing this side of stress going to make you healthier? Well, oxytocin doesn't only act on your brain, it also acts on your body. And one of its main roles in your body is to protect your cardiovascular system from the effects of stress. It's a natural anti-inflammatory. It also helps your blood vessels stay relaxed during stress. But my favorite effect on the body is actually on the heart. Your heart has receptors for this hormone. And oxytocin helps heart cells regenerate and heal from any stress-induced damage. This stress hormone strengthens your heart. And the cool thing is that all of these physical benefits of oxytocin are enhanced by social contact and social support. So when you reach out to others under stress, either to seek support or to help someone else, you release more of this hormone, your stress response becomes healthier, and you actually recover faster from stress. I find this amazing that your stress response has a built-in mechanism for stress resilience. And that mechanism is human connection. I want to finish by telling you about one more study. And listen up, because this study could also save a life. This study tracked about 1,000 adults in the United States, and they ranged in age from 34 to 93. And they started the study by asking, how much stress have you experienced in the last year? They also asked, how much time have you spent helping out friends, neighbors, people in your community? And then they used public records for the next 5 years to find out who died. Okay, so the bad news first. For every major stressful life experience, like financial difficulties or family crisis, that increased the risk of dying by 30%. But, and I hope you are expecting a but by now, but that wasn't true for everyone. People who spent time caring for others showed absolutely no stress-related increase in dying, 0. Caring created resilience. And so we see once again that the harmful effects of stress on your health are not inevitable. How you think and how you act can transform your experience of stress. When you choose to view your stress response as helpful, you create the biology of courage. And when you choose to connect with others under stress, you can create resilience. Now, I wouldn't necessarily ask for more stressful experiences.
Okay, so such an interesting message, and I think touches on so many points that are really important for us, especially as healthcare providers or future healthcare providers. So I'd love to just hear some thoughts. What stood out to you or surprised you in the message in Dr. McGonigal's video?
Are we just supposed to talk?
Yeah, please join on in. I would love that.
I love to study about stress and resilience, and I think this is the first time I've ever heard anyone say oxytocin is a stress hormone. I never made that connection.
Mm-hmm. Me neither until I watched her video. Thank you for sharing that. Other thoughts or things that were surprising?
I think it's really amazing how beneficial almost something like stress can be. And it really makes you think of what other things in our lives that are normally perceived as negative could then be beneficial if we just kind of change our mindset about them.
Absolutely. So it's such a good demonstration of the profound effects that our mind can have on how we interpret and thrive in the face of challenges. Any other comments? Feel free to unmute yourself or to join in the chat. Love that caring for others mitigates negative impacts of stress. Yes, I thought that was really important for us in our professions too. We're all in health sciences, so we are caring for others all the time. And I do wonder, does that actually help us to be more resilient because we are caring for others with most of our time? But also, how do we balance that with the care and social connections that we need outside of work to be able to support our well-being as well? Yeah, that really stood out to me too. I loved that idea that caring created resilience. Thank you. All right.
In my life, but this.
So as I was thinking about the resiliency that Dr. McGonigal talks about in her TED Talk, this idea of persistence also really stood out to me. And I was thinking about how interrelated persistence and resilience are. I love this quote by Calvin Coolidge. Some of you may have seen it. I think this is one of my dad's favorite quotes about how persistence is really so much more important than skills, education, and many other things. And it's really our ability to persist that helps us to be successful more than anything else. So I really think they're interrelated, and you can't have resilience without persistence. So I wanted to just first look at the differences of those in terms of how they're defined. So persistence is defined as firm or obstinate continuance in a course of action in spite of difficulty or opposition. And resilience is the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. So I think both of these concepts are so important, and you can't kind of speak about one with speaking about the other. So the persistence really is what is asked of us in these times of challenge, to keep rising to the occasion, to keep showing up for class, to keep doing our jobs as faculty and staff. But our resilience, I think, is really important for us in order to thrive after these sorts of challenges. And that trait is something that we can build and learn and is sustainable over time. So why does resilience matter? I first wanted to kind of further define what resilience means. So the American Psychological Association defines it here as a process of adapting well in the face of all sorts of adverse, tragic, traumatic experiences. And then some of the other resilience researchers have some more individualized definitions that I think really help put this concept in perspective. So one is that it's a capacity of a dynamic system to adapt successfully to disturbances that threaten viability. Resilience is a process to harness resources to sustain well-being. And the other thing that I think is so important when we define what resilience is that it's something that only can emerge after a difficult event has happened. So it's not a personality trait that we're necessarily just born with. We only really know that it's there and that it's getting stronger or better once we're faced with an adverse experience. So there's a lot of reasons why resilience is helpful to our well-being, especially in these very challenging times that we're facing right now. So first of all, it's a protective factor. It helps protect our well-being. It helps us to be successful in the future. So the more resilient we are, the better we are at dealing with hardships as we face them throughout the course of our lives. It also has a lot to do with perception. So being resilient really requires us to, as they say, hunt for the good stuff. And this is another term for what they talk about in psychology as benefit finding. So how do I shift to a more optimistic mode of thinking and tune into the good and spend less time thinking about the bad? So resilient people are really good at doing that. And it really forces us to embrace all these concepts of positive thinking that we've just talked about. We also know that in studies about resilience after loss, that individuals who have more positive worldviews and are more resilient are also more accepting in terms of their attitude towards death. So they're more accepting and open to difficult experiences that are all going to face us at some point in our lives. So resilience is also important in giving us a sense of purpose and connection. So it helps us to find meaning in our environment, especially when things are difficult. It helps us go to those better thoughts and places. And being resilient means we also can draw upon the comfort of positive memories we've had in the past and use those as another protective factor. It's also helpful in terms of its ability to cultivate positive emotions not only in ourselves, but it also helps us to elicit those positive emotions in others, which creates this supportive network, which, as we just thought about, is so important in building resilience and modulating our stress. It also has been shown that resilient people have better health outcomes in terms of their physical health and well-being. So there's a lot of studies about cardiac recovery, and that we are able to kind of rebound and recover more quickly from things like cardiac events if we have those resilient traits and skills and abilities. Similar findings have been found in individuals undergoing treatment for breast cancer and other cancers as well. So resilience is really important. And I think, again, the thing that is so exciting, just like positive thinking, is this is something that we can develop. So before we move on to thinking more about some of the strategies for building resilience, I want us to just stop and pause and focus in on what are some of the positive experiences that you may have had during this recent pandemic. So what are the things that have actually been good or optimistic that we can kind of shift our mind to thinking about in this moment? So again, please go ahead and unmute yourself or join us in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. I can start us off and say that I think for me, there's been a lot of positive things. And I think sometimes it's hard to share that because it's been such a scary, negative experience in so many ways for so many people. But in my own little personal bubble, I feel like I've been able to exercise more regularly and really kind of develop better self-care practices. I can eat healthier when I'm have access to my kitchen. So I can be around my animals. There's a lot of kind of really positive things for me personally that have come out of this ability to kind of be more flexible in our environments and where we are. So that's just one example. I have lots of others. But I would love to hear from you and kind of share with each other what are the more positive things.
I really enjoy seeing like the whole families go out for walks. Like, I don't know if it's just because I'm out for walks more, but I don't remember like driving by and seeing so many like families as a unit just out spending time together. And I think that's really neat. And it's neat that I get to be out doing that with my family as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's so nice to actually see and feel this sense of community. I think that's been such a helpful thing to see that there is that there and that people, when they have to, can really engage in those activities together. Elizabeth says, getting to have morning coffee with my hubby, so nice. Probably something you normally wouldn't have been able to do.
I have the opportunity to be with my girls 24/7. So usually they're at school until like afternoon, but now it's like all in, like all day long, all the time to be with them. So it's amazing because you spend more time with them and you enrich them, and it's fun. It's nice. It's also hard, but it's very, 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 it's really good. And also I think like saving money because I don't go out and spend money. So,
Yeah, so
so
saving
this is my husband, he loved this point that I will go, is, our money. So I think this is a good one.
Excellent. I think many people probably can agree and relate to that there are many, although there's challenges too, there's so many good aspects of being around children and family. And I agree, financially, we're not eating out, we're not shopping as much, we're not spending money on gas as much. There's so many things that have helped us to be able to save money. Thank you for sharing that. Others. Here's another one in the chat. The positive focus on frontline nurses and other frontline workers. Yeah, all this amazing support and love for all the people out there doing all this important healthcare work, which will be many of us in this room too, or in the future. So more appreciation for the roles that people play in taking care of others. What else? I know there's more positive things out there. Have there been any positive changes in people's health or routines or habits?
I think the nature is healed because is healing because, for example, you don't go out, you don't put like trash, like outside. Also, like less traffic, so it's mean like less pollution. So I think like the nature is also healing. So this is also great.
So good for the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many good things. All right. Well, you've just, there's another good one. A lot of new hobbies and finding new ways to stay entertained. It's nice to say that TV and all the electronics get old after a while. I know, who would have thought? That's great. I feel like it kind of takes us back to this more kind of simple, wholesome way of living where we're kind of having to reconnect with nature and things that don't involve technology since we're all on the computers and phones for work all day or school all day. Establishments are deep cleaning things that normally did not. For example, trains that hadn't been cleaned in a long time. That should have been happening already. Gosh, I didn't even think about that. What a good point. So it's forcing us to kind of take better care of things for our communities. It's interesting. And I think in general too, it probably means that we're not spreading germs as much with other things too. So we're all being more thoughtful and careful about hand washing and spreading different viruses. Maybe we'll have less colds and flus this year. I get to have my cat at work.
Laura. I think also like appreciation of the small.
I love that.
Like the appreciation of the small things that sometimes like small things like make you like happy. Like, you will get appreciated much more, I think. So when, for example, you look inside the house, like with inside like 4 walls, something like you go out, then you said, oh my God, look at those birds, look at this, so start to appreciate that. So I think this is nice.
I agree. And I think if those of you who were at Dr. Savage's talk last week about mindfulness, I think it has helped me, and I think a lot of other people too, to be able to be more present and mindful about our environments because we're not running around as much. We're not running to work and rushing back and forth and in our cars all the time. We get to have our cats with us. We get to be in nature and outdoors more often. So I think those are all really good, amazing examples. And I'm glad to hear that you're all experiencing something positive. So you have just successfully started to build your resilience already without even realizing it. Just being able to reframe what is good and what is positive that's coming out of this really tragic and difficult experience helps us to be more resilient. So that's something that we can stop and pause and reflect on and do regularly. So now I want to move into a little bit of time to talk about some more strategies, both for building a more resilient mindset and also for building some daily habits and routines, which I love as an occupational therapist, to support our abilities to sustain this resiliency. So a lot of our strategies for changing our mindset are around the way we focus on information or experiences. So it's been found in a lot of the research that people who are resilient are able to welcome these challenges like the pandemic and like the other social justice issues we're experiencing now, and have an expectation that from time to time we're all going to suffer. It's a very normal thing that we're all going to experience hard things. So having that mindset and expectation that this is very likely to happen in some way, shape, or form in our life helps us to be more resilient. I think, as we heard from the TED Talk, our social networks cannot be underestimated. The importance of them for our resilience and our health are hugely important. They're hugely important. So she talks about social connection as being both a natural instinct when we're stressed, but also a source of resilience in times of stress. So it is such a means and an end to caring well for ourselves and for those around you. And obviously right now socializing is a little different, and we're probably having to develop new ways of socializing, and I'm sure feeling burned out by certain ways of socializing. But in whatever way, shape, or form it is, we have to really prioritize and maintain our social connections, even if it is virtual or through text or not in person, because they really do make a difference with our health. So the other thing is gratitude. So developing a gratitude practice is something that's talked a lot about in the resiliency literature. And I'm sure we've all heard about gratitude and creating a gratitude journal and thinking about what we're grateful for. I know myself, sometimes it just feels like another thing to do every day, or it doesn't feel that meaningful when I'm doing it. But I think when I get into the habit of doing that, it really does shift your mindset. So there's been some studies around college students and the impacts of developing a gratitude practice on them that I thought were really interesting to share to kind of reinforce how helpful this can be. And students who were given a gratitude practice were able to focus better in class and remain resilient in the face of difficulties during learning. So it strengthened their psychological well-being. It helped them to reflect and reframe their experience to be more positive. It lowered levels of stress, and it helped support more healthy relationships. Physically, people who practiced gratitude in this study had more energy in general, and also were known to experience having generally healthier cardiovascular systems, better sleep, and increased longevity in general. So there are many effects on our health and well-being in terms of gratitude, and gratitude is one of those ways that we can help to shift our mindset to do that hunting for the good stuff, the benefit finding. So really focusing on what the good things are about challenging situations. So lastly, Lucy Hone is another resiliency researcher, and she talks about in her TED Talk, which I've linked for you at the end of this presentation. I really encourage you to watch it. It's very interesting and inspiring. She says these are the 3 things that resilient people do. This is the way that their minds function. So again, they know that bad things are going to happen. They embrace it. They're skilled at choosing what they focus their attention on, and they ask themselves this question, which I think is so helpful. Is what I'm doing or about to do helping or harming me? So really stopping and analyzing your every move, and is this thing that you're going to engage in helpful or harmful for your health and well-being and resilience? And I think if we can do that and be more mindful and aware of that, we really start to shift our mindset to be more resilient. So once we've started to kind of build a mindset that is more resilient, how do we sustain that over time? I love this quote from Octavia Butler, who's a writer, and she talks about how important habits are. So habits, and I love this line here, habit is persistence in practice. Habit will sustain you. Forget about inspiration. Habit is really what matters. So as occupational therapists, we are always interested in habits and how habits can help build health promoting behaviors. And we think a lot about how habits and routines influence our ability to engage in things that are meaningful to us and that help us to thrive. So in terms of the way we approach our habits and routines, I would encourage you to be curious. So let go of some of the problem solving and start to just be curious and open to the things that you're experiencing. So I think having that open-mindedness really, really does help us. And it also helps us to be open to maybe trying things that are not within our typical toolboxes. Again, another kind of concept that has been really helpful in my mental health practice is really thinking about our self-regulation. How do we help ourselves to self-regulate when we're distressed, when we're upset, when we're facing traumatic experiences? And there's a few things that I wanted to point out related to this. So first is called your wellness toolbox. And if any of you have ever worked in mental health practice or know about mental health practice, wellness recovery action plans are something that are developed by Mary Ellen Copeland as a tool for people experiencing mental health challenges. And as she developed this tool more and more, it's become a more general kind of health promotion tool that we can use. And it relies on us being able to identify what we would consider our wellness toolbox. So what are all the things we need to do every day or every week or every month to stay well? And when we're in a good state and healthy and a good frame of mind, we need to develop a list of these things so that we can refer back to them. Because when our nervous systems are frazzled and overwhelmed, it's really hard to access those higher level cognitive functions and be able to draw upon these wellness tools. So do yourself a favor and go home tonight and write down the tools in your wellness toolbox. These could be things like taking that shower every day, even though you're going to sit in your home and no one's ever going to see you. It could be calling a friend. It could be going to your therapy appointment every week. It could be getting outside and exercising. So really take some time to think and reflect on, what do I actually need to do to stay well and function optimally? And I'll provide you with a link so that you can look at the whole wellness recovery action plan and build your own if you'd like to do that later. I also think it's important for us to think about our sensory strategies and how our environment and different stimuli, both in terms of all of our traditional senses and also proprioception and our vestibular senses, can really impact our ability to self-regulate and maintain this resilient mindset. So I think a lot about this with adults and how our sensory processing patterns, the way we respond to input in our environment and our behavioral responses to those are set. We are who we are now, but there are things we can do to modify our environments and our routines to help us to really thrive. So thinking about the lighting, thinking about the fact that you have control over your workspaces and study spaces now more than ever. So how can you change things that will help you? For me, I'm so glad I don't have fluorescent lighting in an office every day. I can have natural lighting. I can get outside and have fresh air. I can play music if I want to. So think about those things and what those are. We can't also underestimate how important play and laughter is, especially when things have been so taxing and serious. So there's a lot of studies that shows that laughter helps relieve pain, helps us be happier, strengthens our immune response. And so I think it's really important to prioritize play just as much as it is sleep and work and other activities that we engage in. So make sure that that is a priority for you, and that can help us to be healthier people. And then lastly, in terms of self-regulation, we have to think about kind of the typical stress regulators. So sleep, limiting technology use, which is so hard right now, exercise and nutrition. And if we aren't physically resilient and taking care of our bodies, it's really hard for our minds to come from a perspective that is resilient and grateful and positive. So our body needs to be in line and functioning well to support our mental health too. And lastly, in terms of daily habits that you might consider, is setting a small achievable goal every week or even every day that helps support your engagement in your everyday activities. So by doing that, it helps us to stay connected to what our core values are, to what's important to us, and it helps us to feel a sense of success, which reinforces all of these skills that build resilience. Some other exercises that you might consider doing, these are just a few, there are so many good ones out there. One is just this daily mental health check-in, fill in the blank. And I think this is really helpful to kind of reconnect with ourselves and what we're feeling. And so you can jot down your answers to those every day if you want, or just once a week to kind of check in, maybe at the beginning and the end of the week. And that is a really helpful way for us to reframe and check in about our mindset. And have we kind of gone towards a more pessimistic worldview, or are we able to still see the good things that are happening to us? Which brings me to the next one. So Martin Seligman, who's kind of the father of positive psychology, I'm sure many of you know of him, he studied this exercise of people writing down 3 good things that happened to them every day. And he found that people who did that had higher levels of happiness and gratitude and less depression overall. So again, this is a really simple, small exercise that you can do that can significantly impact your well-being. So it asks that you write down 3 positive things, and not just write it down, but also reflect on it. So why did these things happen? How did they happen? Why are they important? And by doing that reflection, it really adds to your sense of perceived control and well-being. So the reflection piece is vital, and the timing of it is important too. Do it every day if you can. If you can't do it every day, do it once a week for a few weeks and see how it goes. And just try it out. Try it for a few days, see how you feel. But there is significant support for this helping us to build a more resilient and positive mindset. And then lastly is one that I'm sure we've all done and I think is so helpful to revisit, which is just thinking about what you can and can't control. And resilient people are really good at recognizing what they can control and refocusing their attention on those things and trying to let go and move away from the things that we can't control. So that's another thing that is helpful for us to do when we're really struggling with our positivity in these challenging times. So I want to kind of finish with just a few minutes to hear about the habits and routines that you are either currently engaging in or that you might be inspired to engage in to help you build or sustain your resiliency. So I'd love to hear what is helping people right now and share and kind of be able to learn from others before we wrap up this evening. Yoga every single day. Oh my gosh, you're my inspiration. That's awesome. Is that something that you did before the pandemic or that you've been doing regularly since?
So I did do it a lot before. However, it's never been like on my schedule to make sure I do every day. And it's kind of becoming like a routine of I wake up and that's the first thing I think of.
That's so great. And I'm sure totally shifts your mindset for the start of your day.
Yeah, it really does.
That's great. Taking time to reflect on strategies to maintain positivity, incorporating new strategies every day. Thank you, Dr. Puzafera. That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that you're prioritizing those things. And everyone that's here tonight clearly is doing the same. So I think I commend you for taking the time to do that. Sometimes it's not new strategies either. It's revisiting ones that we maybe have lost touch with. I know myself, I used to do more of the gratitude practice and reflection, and you just get so busy that you stop doing these things. And this is an important reminder that these things significantly impact our health. So they are really important and helpful.
Well, habits and routine are not really part of sleeping, but I think sleeping would really, really, really going to build my and sustain my resiliency.
Yes.
I really need it, especially nowadays. Because I'm with the girls all day long, then I need to study all night. So I go to sleep around like 3 until I fall asleep around like 3:34 a.m. And then I need to wake up in the morning because my husband goes to work, so I need to be with the girls. So I feel like sleeping really, really, really going to sustain my resiliency.
Absolutely. And we know, I mean, there's so much good information about sleep and our health, and it's such a hard thing to prioritize and to get right. Even when we try, we don't always sleep as well as we want to. So, but I think that's so good to just kind of revisit and make time for prioritizing that whenever we can.
It's true.
Yeah, I agree. Any new things that anyone is wanting to try or hoping to try? Now's your chance to think about them before you go back to your busy lives and studying and working. Well, I'll leave you with a few other resources before we finish tonight. If you haven't heard of Insight LA, they are an amazing resource for mindfulness and meditation practices. And there's a particular guided practice about gratitude in challenging times that I think is really relevant to some of the things we've talked about tonight. So I encourage you to check that out. I've left you with some more detailed instructions about the 3 good things exercise that kind of helps talk you through how to do that in more depth. And that is listed at this Greater Good Science website, which is through Berkeley and has a lot of really amazing resources for educators, for parents, for students, all of it. This Growing Resilient website has some good tools and activities to build into your routines and habits. As I talked about, the WRAP website can give you more information about building your wellness toolbox. And then there's a couple of TED Talks in a book that I think really support some of the concepts that we've talked about and that you're all reflecting on. So this will all be available to you in the recording or as a PDF after tonight. So thank you so much for just spending the time with me to reflect and to think about these things that seem so simple and so over talked about, but are so important for us to revisit. And I hope it's given you a little bit of time to kind of think about what's one small thing that you can do to kind of shift your thinking or your habits or your routines to support your well-being. So if there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to stay and have a discussion for the last few minutes, but I know also people are busy and ready to go get on with things. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Thank you so much.